Hello and welcome to Chapter Chat with Sarah. Here we share true life stories. Today's story is a special chapter in my book, Healing Your Life, One Leaf at a Time. Hello, Cassandra, and welcome.
Hi.
Cassandra, your story is Chapter 9 in my second book, Healing Your Life. And in that chapter, you talked about your life as a little girl growing up, and you said that you didn't really have happy memories about your childhood. Can you please share with the listeners what your life was like back then as a little girl?
I don't characterize myself as having a bad childhood. It just wasn't full of happy memories. There was really no love in our house. It was very much run like a business. We all had jobs. We all didn't necessarily have to like each other, but we functioned. There wasn't any family vacations or even fun outings. It was just everybody did their job and we coexisted. I didn't know any different at the time, but there was always some longing. And, when I went to friends' houses, there was a different energy. It just didn't feel the same. But, now I know my parents did not like each other, talked of divorce often. So that didn't make for a happy home.
And I suppose when you went to friends' house and then you would see what their lives were like, maybe at the dinner table or, just in general, you would make that comparison.
You want to know the funniest thing, and it's sad but funny. I would friends would take me around their house, and this is my room and this is my parents' room. And I said, "Your parents have to share a room? Oh, that's gross. Mine have their own rooms."
Oh my gosh. Okay.
I know. It's sad.
Yeah, very telling for sure. On top of that, moving years forward, there was a time in your life when you suffered a really terrible accident, and that accident left you bedridden for several months. So, what was it that happened? And I know we talked about it in the book, but for the listeners, can you kind of expound on that?
Well, it was a series of things that happened in my life, and I now know that it was the ultimate wake-up call. Little things happen and you struggle through, but this was a big thing. I was kicked by one of our horses and severely injured. I had internal bleeding that it took them a while to find where the bleeding came from. I, had it, my entire chest was opened and every organ taken out and inspected. That's what they told me they had to do. I spent a week in the hospital and then 3 months in bed, just not I'm in a wheelchair for a while, not being able to move. It was pretty traumatic. This was on the heels of my husband having, I think, his second or third surgery, which kind of in my mind, I don't even know if it was warranted, but he definitely liked the medications that was given to him after surgeries. So while I was bedridden, he was not functioning as a partner. After 3 months, when I was able to get up and around and just take care of business, I found that for the whole time I was in bed, he'd not opened a piece of mail, not a bill was paid. Our houses, plural, we had two houses and a vacation home. We were all in foreclosure. I found bottles of alcohol everywhere. I found pill bottles hidden behind walls, in the garage, under things. It was really surreal and absolute eye-opening. Now, mind you, these things were happening before I got injured, but it took that for me to really open my eyes and said, "This is ridiculous."
So, who was in the house with you? I mean, there was children at the time.
We had 4 girls at the time. My oldest daughter was living in our rental property, and we had 3 at home, my youngest being 3 years old at the time.
Oh, wow. So that was a lot. So, um, when you were up and about and then faced with all this, what were the next steps that you had to take? I mean,
I I actually that weekend or the next weekend, I can't really remember, I went to New York City to visit my cousin. It was like, I'm up, I'm out, I'm gonna go visit my cousin. I'm gonna take, a couple days and I'm gonna go back and just get right back on fighting the good fight. And when I came home from New York City, my house was in absolute upheaval. I took the youngest one. The 2 other girls were screaming at their dad. They were in some kind of fight, and it was over alcohol. He had taken alcohol out of the oldest room, which, she was a college student. She had some some bottles of something in her closet. And at that moment, I said, "That's it. You're out." And at that second, I asked him to leave. And they were his daughters, the 2 that were living with us at the time were his daughters, and I said, "You can stay with me, or you can go with him. I don't care, but he is not staying here anymore." I don't know where I got the strength. It all just kinda hit me. It all just said, "What did I just walk into?"
Yeah. I can't imagine after being bedridden and that had to be a nightmare, and then to, find out that there was an even worse nightmare that you had to face. So that was definitely a lot.
Yeah, and that was it. That was the weekend that I he went to live with his mother, and his youngest went with him, and his oldest stayed with me and the baby.
Wow. Okay. So you then have experience with drug and alcohol abuse too, which is something that a lot of families suffer through. So I feel bad that you had to lose so much at that time. How old were you to kind of put things in perspective? What stage of your
I
life?
was 48. I had my youngest daughter, and I was 45 when I had her. She was just a little one. And the sad thing is that, the addiction I really grew up with. My parents were drinkers. It wasn't that they were drunk every night, but they had to have their alcohol to deal with each other, the family. And I didn't think too much of it. When you grow up with it, you don't really know. Later on in life, my mother became a serious alcoholic. So, it's one of those, they say you marry into what you know, and I absolutely did.
This was your second marriage?
Yeah.
All right. I know for the listeners who have not read the book yet, it kind of details, meeting your first husband and then what ended that, and then the second husband, which sounded like you married the second time your Prince Charming, but it turned out not to be.
Yeah. For a year and a half, I lived a fairy tale life, and I really thought it was the best thing, the best relationship. I thought I had everything, but we weren't even married, not even a year, and his ex-wife passed away suddenly, and his 2 young daughters moved in with us, and it was too much for him to take. The guilt of everything. A very long, detailed story about it. His girls were not educated. Their mother was supposed to homeschool them. They were not. They had no medical treatment. It was really very, very hard for the family to deal with the entire circumstance. And at the same time, there was a lot of other circumstances that happened to us. I had a friend's son commit suicide. We lost a good friend in a car accident. It was just the whole situation hit us at once, and he couldn't cope. That moment on, the alcohol took over, and then the drugs took over.
Wow. So downhill from there. So, well, and the reason that we share and tell stories is it's truly in the hope that it's going to help other people. So, what you're sharing is real. I mean, it's life and it's tragic, but this is what a lot of people have to go through. Maybe some not as extreme, but if there was one hard life lesson that you have learned, either through the first marriage or the second marriage or just throughout life, I mean, just is there something that you could grab onto that you'd want to share with the audience to say that, this was one of my hardest lessons that I learned, and possibly that might help someone else?
I think it's a very personal lesson that a lot of women can relate to. I think that for me, it was hard to learn that love doesn't heal everything. That, and I'm going to get choked up, that loving my husband with all my heart, unconditionally, was not enough to save him. Loving my stepchildren as my own was not enough to get them to love me back. And that's a hard lesson to learn, to want to do so much for people. And I mean, unconditionally, I didn't care that they didn't love me like a mother. That wasn't it. But to actually try to give them a better life and them treat me like I did, or my husband, to just love him and with all his faults and say, we can get through this, but that wasn't enough. His addiction was much stronger than that. And it's been almost 9 years, and to this day, that still hurts and still brings tears to my eyes.
Yeah, you didn't want to have it turn out the way that it did. So you did everything that you could. You were there. You wanted to make it work, but it's the addiction, the alcohol, the drugs, they're not themselves. So that had to be a very, very hard time to go through. And I think there's a lot of people that have blended marriages, and it's hard with stepchildren, the acceptance, and they maybe sometimes, do you think, not trust that you're really trying to not be their, mother or take over, but that you genuinely do care, and then that you are there for them, you're in their corner, but it's just so hard for them to really see it. I just see that and sense that in conversations with other people.
It really is. You need to have the patience of a saint and the will to get through it. And they were my second set of stepkids, and I really felt qualified for the job. But it didn't matter. I mean, it didn't matter to them. Their mind was made up, and that was just really sad. Even to this day, my husband, didn't die. He lived for a couple years after we separated, and that whole time, I longed for him to get better. I longed for our family to be back together again, and that really hurt. So I don't know how to get over that. I really don't.
So you just didn't really move completely past that then?
It's been very hard. I mean, I think the hardest part is understanding the addiction. I can't understand it. I know it's not personal, but when you're in the middle of it, it feels very personal.
Right. And it would, because you're there to support and to love. And it's like, isn't this more than your desire to keep, you know, having the addiction to the drugs and alcohol? I'm here for you. So it would be hard to understand. So you've had a lot of twists and turns in your life and a lot of ups and downs. And if you could change something or a decision, was there a decision that you made or a turn that you took that you could kind of say, "Hey, I've learned from this. I want to share this with you. I think this would help you." Was there something that gnaws at you or grabs at you that you might want to mention?
I think about this a lot, because I try to live my life of not repeating mistakes or whatever. And I can't say that I regret anything, but one thing that I have absolutely learned and that I teach people today in classes is to really trust your gut. When like I knew things were getting bad with my husband. I knew it, but we were so wrapped up in raising the kids and me with a baby and working our jobs that I just longed for things to be different. Instead of trusting myself and trusting my gut and saying, listen, I know deep down inside this is not healthy. I wanted the love more. And that's one thing that people really need to do is take stock in what they really feel, what their heart is really telling them.
Pay attention, right?
Pay attention, not just to yourself, what you really, really want, what is there in front of you. And then I think we can make better decisions.
And I think, we're all guilty of hoping and wishing and kind of thinking things are going to turn out different than they actually do sometimes. But, sometimes it's like the red flags or the warning signals or where did I go wrong? And it's just a good reminder for other people that, you can't always count that it's going to turn out that the way that you hope. You gotta pay attention.
I'm grateful for all of those. I truly am grateful for all the highs and the lows because that's what's made me who I am. Ever since I was little, all of that made me this ultimate fighter that will never give up. And I'm really grateful for that. But I also know that I could have done a better job by myself, not by myself, for myself, of listening to myself and not just wanting this fairy tale life.
Well, and I think that when we, did the interview and wrote your story together, I had just a great sense about that too, that you overcame a whole lot of I don't know, hurdles and situations from your childhood with your mother and your dad, your sister. So there was a whole lot of dynamics that you had to deal with, and to be where you are now is really a good testimonial that, you you're strong. You can do this. You can make it. And that was one of the reasons that I really wanted to take a chance of getting some of your time so that we could do this podcast, so that you could show that, hey, it's not always gonna turn out the way that you want, but that doesn't mean that you can't go on and still have a good and successful life. The subtitle for your chapter is Angels Are Messengers. So I guess I'd want to know if there's a good message that you could share with us from an angel, or who are your angels that you feel that you've had in your life? Because as the subtitle, what did that really mean?
When I look back at lots of different events and I see some of the players, it's very interesting to me that they're not who I thought they would be. For example, I know now that my stepdad was an absolute angel to me and is to me still now. He passed 20 years ago, but he's an absolute angel on my shoulder. He came into my life when all of my siblings had either, moved out or moved with my dad, and it was just me and my mom. And he absolutely showed absolute unconditional love for me, joy, laughter. And when things would get bad with my mom and her temper was starting to flare, he would shush me out of the room to shield me from that. And that he didn't have to do any of that. And I now know that he was sent there to save me, to give me my adolescence and to help me find a way out of this. And there's been other people that I realized. I had an aunt and an uncle who treated me very special, and my mother would yell at them for spoiling me, but I'm like, no one else ever paid any attention to me, but they did. So they too felt like angels to me. When my husband left and I was left with, houses in foreclosure and complete disarray of appliances, and gosh, my well broke. I had no water for days and things like that, that strangers or parents of my daughter's friends came and said, "Oh, let me help you do that." The lady that ran the daycare said, "Don't worry about paying me. Your daughter can come here. It's okay. I know you need to work." And I'm like, these people knew very little about what was going on, if anything. Yet my friends that I'd known for 20 years ran for the hills.
Wow.
So there was a reason why those people came into my life, and I've made it a point to know every one of them and go back and thank them. And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I go, "You have no idea what it meant to me for you to come over and do that for me." So I think that recognizing your angels, acknowledging them is part also of survival, knowing that there's people, there's strangers, there's people passed over even that are looking out for us all the time.
Right. And do you think that they help to guide you in a certain direction? Because before we close, that's one of the things that I want to talk about, is for you to tell us about the special business that you own and operate. I mean, the online reviews say lots of great things about what you're doing, and the positive difference that you're also making in the community. So I'm just wondering, when we're talking about angels and messengers, did they guide you to be where you're at today?
Absolutely. I moved to Ohio after my husband passed, and I needed to not look back. I needed to just go someplace, reboot, and start over. I had no money. I had a good job, so I was working, but I needed to secure a future. I needed to say, I've got to have a reason for living to 100. I have to have the means to do that. So I kept asking, praying, what do you want me to do? Why am I still here? Why has all this happened? What do you want me to do? And I kept hearing, be of service, be of service, be of service. I just kept hearing that. And not being a very religious person, I didn't know what that meant exactly. So I took it to mean doing what I know how to do. And I know how to run a consignment business because my mother had one, my grandmother had one. So I knew how to do that. I love crafts. I love to bake. I love music. I love to upcycle things. So I said, okay, I'm going to do something that involves things that I love and try to give back to a community at the same time. So I found a tiny little community with this big old church that had been empty, and with pennies in the bank was able to get this church. And it took me, I think, three years to get it into using shape to open a little coffee shop with a consignment shop, and we have baked goods. And now, after 6.5 years, we have all kinds of classes and events, a lot of self-help classes. When my story was published about my husband passing, I would get regular visitors of newly widowed women. And it was just very nice to be able to share with them what I understand about grief and what I knew they were going through. And that has really helped me. The whole process has helped me heal, and the community has absolutely given back to me. If I had a nickel for every time they've given us a compliment, I would be so wealthy. So I'm so grateful to be able to do all of that.
So you would say that at this point in your life that you're where you think you're supposed to be, that maybe everything that you've gone through has been kind of a lesson and guiding you to where you're at in life now. Because I think that what we have talked about personally before today is, how well your children are doing, grandchildren, your life in general. Like, you are definitely on a good path.
I absolutely know that I'm where I should be right now. To be very honest, when people say things like, well, if it wasn't for XYZ happening, you wouldn't be here now. I don't really resonate with that because I know my husband would love to be here and share this with me. He and I were amazing partners that way, but I just know that everything I've been through has put me where I am now. And I'm going to do the best I can to make this little corner of my town a nice, safe, warm place for my community to go. And then I know that'll give back to me. If I can put that out, I know I can get it back.
That's wonderful, and truly is. I know I've been in the store, I feel the vibe, I feel the warmth and the love, and I've seen the growth, and people, all around are, kinda saying, "I wanna check this out, I wanna be a part of that." So I wanna say thank you for all that you're doing and all that you're giving back, and it's very important, and also thank you for sharing this today. Hopefully, we could pick this up again and kinda do an update and share, some of the other things that you have going on. Did you wanna give the name of your, business? Because it's something that resonated with me right away when I heard it, that it was like a place that I wanted to know more about.
Well, it got its name is kind of a two meaning. It it started out because people would ask me, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, we're going to have, baked goods and coffee and gifts and, crafts. We're just going to have a bunch of random stuff." And then I realized that I liked the phrase random and I liked the phrase random acts, because one thing that I learned early on when raising children was when children got too full of themselves, we would then decide that we would do something charitable. And it always brought them back to reality when we would go to the inner city and, hand out lunches, or we would pay for somebody's meal at a restaurant or somebody at a drive-through. It always kind of gave them a check back that, hey, wait, this is not always all about us. It's about other people. So the word random acts really just resonated with me. So that's what we call the place.
Right, random acts, and that's important, and I'm glad that you shared that, because that's what it got my curiosity, and I wanted to know more. And then as I learned more about it, it was like I definitely see that the name fits, what you're doing fits, and again, I want to say thank you for what you do and for giving back, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for letting me share my story. I appreciate you.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So that's all for today. Please tune in for our next show with Isabella. Growing up, she wanted to be awesome, striking, and bodacious. Remember this verse, "For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you." Luke 4:10.
You've got to run, girl.